Hello, hello. I really hope that you guys can hear me. Let me know in the chat if you can. I am on a new Streamlab stream device. Is that the right term? I don't feel like that's the right term. But I'm trying something a little different today, so hopefully it will work. And hopefully this will, you can hear me okay and see me okay and all those good things. If you are new to the channel and so on, this channel is about reselling. It's about being an entrepreneur. It's about selling on Amazon, eBay, some of the other platforms too. Hopefully some encouragement, hopefully some real numbers, hopefully some things that you can actually use to improve your business. Scott is here and says, hey, it looks good. Thanks, Scott. I am trying this, like I said, I'm trying something a little different, but we will see how it goes. So I'm not going to be on too long today because, to be totally honest, I don't have a huge amount of stuff to talk about. Probably a little bit less than normal, but I wanted to share with you all some of my thoughts about a topic that comes up in the reselling community quite often, and that is the idea of, is anybody making any money? There's a lot of resellers out there who share their top line number. They tell you, hey, I made this much money in sales this week, this month, today, this year, whatever. But they don't really tell you some of the bottom line numbers, like their profit and so on. Are they making money after taxes? What are their fees like? What's their operational expenses and all that? And I question a lot of people's, not anybody in particular, but a lot of people's numbers just in general, if they're making any money or not. Because it's really easy to throw out a big number and show a graph and say, hey, I made $5,000, I made $10,000 this month, whatever. But once you start breaking down all the fees and all the costs, sometimes there's not that much left. So I thought I would talk about that a little bit today, kind of get any feedback that you had as well. And then show you some numbers that I had from last month in July. Now, I should probably say this up front. I am not a large Amazon seller. I have had 5-figure months on Amazon. I've never had a 6-figure month. That would be over 100K. But I've had some 5-figure months, so low 5 figures. And I have the desire to build my Amazon business back a little bit bigger than it is now. So I've started kind of spending money again. Now, I have not spent a lot of money this year, this calendar year of 2022. As many of you know, I started a leads service business at the beginning of 2022, and it took a lot of my time and energy, to be quite honest. It wasn't so much money, it was more just the time and energy to get it started, to hire a team, to get clients subscribed and all those good things, and to keep refining my process and get that as good as I can get it. That is a never-ending process for how good it can become. So, it's not like I've finished with that, but I've definitely learned a lot in the last 6 months, which I think it's been 6 months now since I've been doing it. Excuse me. And I'm now able to focus a little bit more time back on Amazon. So I've been buying some items all year long, each month, spending a few $1,000s and, selling and so on and dealing with. But I'm now kind of redevoted myself to really ramping up for Q4, which is just right around the corner. So, excuse me. I thought it would be a good time to share some actual numbers and talk about this topic that your top line number doesn't really mean anything. So I don't know how many of you out there are Amazon sellers. It could be eBay. It doesn't really matter what platform you're on. But I know you probably look at your sales a million times a day like I do. Like, there needs to be some sort of limitation on the Amazon seller app to where you can only look at it X number of times in a day, or your eBay sales. I used to do the same thing when I was selling a lot on eBay. I would go on, and then, an hour later, I'd look and see, oh, did I get another sale? Oh, there's a ding. I got a sale. But ultimately, none of that really matters, because your sales are great, but you can be selling, and actually be going out of business if you're not profitable. So sales don't really matter. I remember years ago, I was working for Gap, and we hit kind of hard times in the early 2000s and so on. And a new CEO came in, and he started making all these changes, and he started cutting all these expenses. He cut the payroll of our stores by about 40%, which is a pretty big number. We couldn't order supplies at the same rate we could before. We had to really shore up that amount. And so after a quarter or two of this, the operating expenses of the business went down because you cut staff and you cut, your other supplies and things like that. So the bottom line revenue number, or the bottom line profit number as a percentage, was better. But because people weren't buying the clothes, the overall sales still went down, and people were not really making as much. We were not making that much as a company. We were actually making the low single digits in percentage. And after a few more quarters of this, eventually, Wall Street caught on, other investors caught on. They started closing stores, and eventually he was fired. So even though the company was like a $15 billion company at that time, we just were not really doing that well, even though we were getting, sales are coming in, but we weren't really making any money. And I just think that, a lot of people probably don't spend the time on, their sales and their numbers behind the scenes like they would. I'm going to see if I can put a chat thing in here in this. I'm going to see if I can get the chat up for you guys, if I can get it rolling on the side. I don't know if I can or not, so I'm going to try it real quick and see if I can add that. It probably won't work, but we'll give it a shot. Anyway, yeah, there's a chat box, but I feel like you're not even going to be able to see anything. We'll pretend. So I'm still learning this new Streamlabs, because I wanted to highlight Morgan's comment, who said, you should always be progressing towards a goal, start the thrift and garage sales, and eventually be selling gold, property, or Rolexes or whatever. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's, that's accurate. I think that, a lot of people will actually start, like you said, Morgan, down at those low end, like with thrift stores and things like that. And then they will, start branching off into other products and so on. But I don't know that, really a lot of people come into this reselling game really knowing numbers. And this is going to sound bad. I think a lot of people in the reselling game, quite honestly, are clueless when it comes to their numbers. They don't know how much profit they're making, if any. They don't know what their percentage of expenses is. And probably a lot of people, I remember watching some resellers back in the day who would tell you, just sell the crap and don't worry about all that stuff. It'll take care of itself. And I thought to myself, that's ridiculous. That's a very dangerous mindset, that when tax time comes, for instance, or, you spend so much that now you have no capital for inventory, you're going to be screwed. And it happened to some of those people because they were just spending and not selling through at the rate that they said. They're like, oh, look at this great deal. I can buy this for $5 and sell it for 50, but it wouldn't sell for 50. And they'd buy 100 of them or 100 similar items. And then, a couple months later, they had no sourcing budget left, and their fees were due to eBay or Amazon or whatever. Their taxes would come due. All these things that come, they needed supplies for the business, and they just didn't have it. You have to know something about your numbers, because if you don't know your numbers at all, you're really running the risk of really going broke. And I would argue you will go broke eventually if you don't know your numbers. And one of the big numbers you need to know is profit. So I'm going to, Morgan asked if I was talking about somebody in particular. No, not really. I kind of remember who that is, Morgan, but I don't remember for certain. I think that there's lots of people out there, Morgan, who would fall into that category. But I think the lesson is applicable to everybody. And it's easy to get wrapped up in sales or not sales and forget that, you know, the reason you're really doing this again is you really want to make a profit, right? You want to pay yourself. You want to earn some spending money, whatever your reason for doing this is. Excuse me. So I thought I would take a few moments and share with you, kind of where I'm coming from with some of my numbers. Now, granted, last month was nothing special. I think I ran up a few percentage points over last year. And I think that last month was the beginning of kind of what I'm going towards, this coming month and these next few months for Q4. So I'm going to share with you some results from last month. This is inside my inventory lab, and this is just Amazon. This doesn't include any other revenue streams. It doesn't include affiliates. It doesn't, because I haven't put those in yet. I haven't done my month in. So all this is Amazon. This is nothing else but Amazon. This is for the month of July. And you can see over here to the right that I don't think you can see the cursor actually on this, but maybe I'm able to show that. I'm not sure if I'm able to show my cursor or not. Believe it or not. I don't think I am. But over to the far right, you should be able to see my total for sales here, 6351.80. Oh, there it is. So 6351.80. So 6352 was the total top line number. So $6,350. I think I was up about 5% or something like that over July of last year. Wasn't a huge number. I don't have that number right in front of me, but it wasn't big. Last year in July, I was doing all books. So there was no really just OA or RA. There was a little bit of RA, but no OA. You can see here all the different fees that Amazon has in terms of, or all the stuff that kind of came out of that top line number. There were some reimbursements. Those were for selling fees and things like that. There were some shipping credits. Anything that's red is money that left. Anything that's black is money that came in. And there were some liquidations. And then when you see the total for income, you're at 6221. So, refunds was, what is that? Probably about 7%, something like that. Cost of goods sold is $28.43. Now, if some of you may be watching, I just put out an Instagram post yesterday that talked about the 2X rule. You're probably going to spend about twice as much on inventory. Let me back up. The amount you spend on inventory, you can probably sell 2X that amount in terms of the sales volume. Now, 2X this is about 5,700, so I actually did a little better than 2X. Another way to look at it is your cost of goods is going to be roughly half your sales top line number for any given month. So I'm a little better than that, which I guess is okay. Selling fees, $940. FBA transaction fees, $1,000. Other fees and so on, I was actually plus here. Inventory fees and so on, about $78. And other expenses, $31. And then some liquidations, some cost of advertising. I don't know why I'm even having cost of advertising. I didn't think I was running any ads, but I'll have to check that. And so on. So you get down to the top line, or you get down to the net profit on the month. So the net profit was $1,328, which you can also see down here. So if we pull up our handy dandy calculator here, and I don't know if you can see this, you probably can't, but $1,328, divided by 60, what do we say? The total was 6352. Is a total of 20%. So last month, I netted 20% margin on, or this is a gross margin, very important number, gross margin, on $6,000 of sales. So that's about 20% of 6,300. a lot of, now let's think about this for a minute, what this really means. So I spent $2,800 on inventory. Now, yes, I did not buy all that inventory last month. Some of that inventory got bought in the previous month, probably even some other months. But that money came back to me. Why do I say that? Because it's a cost of goods sold. It means I got that money back from Amazon. It was paid out as part of my payout. So I technically got that $2,800 back, but that's for sourcing, right? You can't really count that as income. And I spent it and I got it back. Then, I had all these other fees and so on. But once it was all said and done, there was a net profit of $1,328. This is money that is what you would consider to be your gross profit. Why is it gross profit? Because gross profit, by definition, is you take your sales, you subtract your cost of goods, you subtract your other expenses. In this case, we'll say the Amazon expenses, or your other case. Like if I shrink all these down, they're probably a little bit easier to see. You can see all the fees right here, right? And this is what you have left over. But, and here's where a lot of resellers go wrong. I'll wait here in the chat if anybody wants to answer, but if you don't, I'll give you a few seconds. Am I able to put this $1,328 in my pocket for the next month? What do you think? What do you think, chat? After all the fees and the cost of goods, we'll assume the cost of goods is off the table because it's going to be used for more cost of goods. Am I able to put this $1,328 in my pocket for profit from what I sold last month? It's not a trick question, but you need to think it through for a moment, because I didn't maybe give you all the information you needed, but you should know this information if you're a reseller. So the reality is you are not able to put this $1,328 in your pocket. Why? Because what you'll notice is missing from all these calculations, because I haven't done my month-end numbers yet. I usually do my month-end, by the way. And are you doing your month-end numbers? But I usually do my month-end numbers about 4 or 5 days into the month, because I let everything filter through in my bank accounts and so on. I have not put in there the operating expenses of my business. What are the operating expenses? Well, operating expenses are when you buy supplies. Operating expenses would be travel, would be gas in your car if you're not taking mileage deduction. It would be supplies for shipping. It would be if you paid a prep and ship center. And oh yeah, it would be a salary for you. Now some of you might be saying, well, I'm not paying myself a salary. And I know a lot of resellers out there claim that they don't. But at some point you're going to have to pay yourself something to do this work. Now I would argue this is not a lot of work here that I did for this. And not all this money will be spent. But after it's all said and done, I probably will lose about a quarter of this to those operating expenses, and then the rest will be a salary, quote unquote, if I want. That's not a lot of money, gang, but I mean, what's 75% of 1328? Probably about $900, something like that. That's not really any kind of a full-time salary, right? And I don't look at this as a full-time salary money. This is just one stream of income. But that's on $6,000 in sales. If I did $12,000 in sales, arguably this would all be double. And it would be a little more respectable, right? Then my salary might be around $2,000, somewhere around there. Getting better, right? But a lot of resellers will they'll see this number and think that that's it. Yeah, that's net profit, but it's not really net profit until you figure in your operating expenses. And Mark makes a good point too. He says you have to remember about your taxes. At some point, you're going to owe taxes on this money, and if you're not paying yourself a salary, and this goes back to, I mean, there's all kinds of things we could talk about with this. If you're not paying yourself a salary, that's fine. You don't have to, but then your business is going to owe taxes on that income. Either your business is going to pay taxes or you're going to pay taxes. Somebody's going to pay taxes on that income. Promise you. If you're not doing that, Uh, I don't recommend that because if you're not doing that, you're going to get screwed by the IRS at some point. They will come for you. So I would definitely not recommend that. So you need to take these revenue numbers that you're seeing from resellers and these profit numbers with a grain of salt. And I say this because I don't want to step on anybody's toes. There are people out there who are, I don't know if they start off this way. There are resellers out there who make content and post content, and they get caught up in this idea of looking better than they really are, wanting you to think they're doing amazing, and maybe they are doing amazing. But there's cold, hard numbers around some of this stuff. There's percentages. And as you grow in any of these businesses, as you outgrow, say, your ability to run the business, like it becomes too much. Like there's at some point, as say an Amazon seller, for instance, people talk about a number each month. Maybe it's 20,000, maybe it's 30,000 bucks a month, whatever. There comes a point where you literally cannot do it all yourself. You're going to need help. And once you need help, you're going to have even more expense and cost and complexity. But no matter what you do, as your revenue goes up, your percentage, your net profit percentage is going to go down. That's just a fact. Now, it's going down, the net percentage, but the actual dollars are going up because it's on a bigger revenue number, right? But I see people who will make posts on Instagram and they'll say, yeah, my profit percentage is 35 or 40%. And they're doing OA on Amazon. I call shenanigans. Just not happening. Like, the reality is this. With certain models, you are limited by how much you have to pay for the inventory, right? And I just told you that a 2X model is good. It's an average. You could do a little better. So if you gross $10,000 in sales in a month and you're doing OA, for instance, you probably spent nearly $5,000 on that inventory. That's just the way the margins work now. It just is. Anything other than that, you're going to have to be very, very, very super selective, and you're going to spend an awful lot of time getting inventory. So that means you made 10 grand, 5,000 was cost of goods. So that's not really profit. Then Amazon's going to take 2,500, maybe 3,000, depending on your fees and setup, another 25 to 30%. So now you're down to like 20% or 25% left. And then you got your operating expenses I just told you about. So when you see people who say like they have these high percentages, either they're willfully lying because they want you to think they're doing better than they really are, or they're just ignorant of their numbers a lot of times. That's not to say that you can't do really, really good numbers on these platforms. You can, for sure. But if you don't have your processes in place and you don't have a firm grasp of, your margins, you are potentially working for very, very little money or even losing money. There are ways you could lose money in this game and keep building sales because, you're spending $5,000 a month, but you're only making $9,000 in sales. You're probably about break even at that amount at best. If you were doing $8,500, you're probably losing a little bit of money. Why are you losing? Maybe you had to reprice down to really, really low, and that hurt your margins and so on. You need to figure out if this game is worth it. So when I ask the question, are resellers making any money? I ask it in the sense that you know what your numbers are. You know what a reasonable amount of money means to you. And look, I just showed you a month where I did $6,000 in sales and made $1,300. And that's all OA. Like I don't know that there's any RA in there. Very, very little, if any. That is not a crazy amount. If you talk to any big sellers, they're going to tell you, that's pretty normal with an OA type approach. Would you say that's a lot of money? No, I would not say that's a lot of money. Was it a full-time job for me? No, it was not a full-time job at all. I would, if I had to guess the number of hours I spent working last month in July on Amazon, selling on Amazon, I would say it's maybe 20 hours total. It wasn't a lot. It was really just buying, getting in a couple shipments, and then sending them in. I would say it was 20 hours. So, let's say even take the 25% off for operating costs. Let's say I made $900. Call it $1,000 even. $1,000 for 20 hours of work, 50 hours of an hour, $50 an hour. It's a good rate, no doubt. I wouldn't say it's a killer amount though. Now, if I was doing, $40,000 a month, 7 times that amount, that's a reasonable salary, right? Then I'm netting $6,000 maybe. And I think that's probably about right. You may want to just make $100 a month. You may want to make $1,000 a month. It doesn't really matter what the amount is. What matters is it worth the time you're putting in? And that goes into all kinds of other questions. Mark said an old timer said, the sales don't need anything, it's how much you made. Exactly. It's how much. That reminds me, Mark, and we said this before, a profit percentage doesn't matter. A net percentage doesn't matter. What matters is actual cash in the bank. You could say, I made 100% return on this product. Well, you bought it for $1 and sold it for $3 and netted $1. Okay. But it was only $1 and you had to spend your time doing it. So was it really worth it? Maybe not. Actual dollars are what spend. You can't spend a percentage, right? Dollars are what matter, and you have to decide if the number of dollars you're getting make sense or not. And I think a lot of resellers out there are caught up in that top line number. They're caught up in that $6,300 or $20,000 or $50,000 or whatever the number is. I know a couple larger sellers and so on that they net a net profit percentage that's down in the single digits. That's all they take home from this business. But because they're doing millions of dollars in sales, that's a big number. So, would you rather have a 8% net making $300,000 a year, or would you rather have a 30% making $40,000 a year? I know which one I'd rather have. Like, it's not really about the percentage, right? It's about the actual dollars. So I always caution you to go in and ask people when you see them on social media and so on, make sure they share with you what their net is. And if they don't know what their net is and they start saying things that you realize this person doesn't really know what their numbers are, or they're saying something that doesn't quite make sense, then I would say to you, I would probably be very cautious about following that person's advice. And the reason is because if they don't know their numbers, you're not even really sure that what they're doing is even worth it, because they're not sure. And that's not to denigrate anybody. I just think that it's so easy to get caught up in that top line number for so many people. They lose focus on what matters, and that's money in our pocket. And by the way, I would say that one of the other ways that you can look at this business is, last month I invested $2,800 of my inventory money into product, right? And got $1,300 back. That is like 45% return on my investment. That is phenomenal. If you could return 45% on your money in the stock market, there'd be no reason to go do anything else. But the reality is you can't do that over the long term. It's virtually impossible. You'll regress to the mean. So if you have a business where you can take $1,000 and turn it 45%, let's say even in 2 months, And so then 2 months you have $1,450, and then you flip that into 45% at a 45% ROI, and then that nets you, now you're at about $2,000 after 4 months. Like you've doubled your money in 4 months. That's a crazy rate of return. Even and now that all supposes you don't take money out for yourself or anything else, but that's the power of being in business. Like it's the rates of return are phenomenal, way better than you can earn in the market and so on. Of course, it's not a passive thing. You have to put time and energy into it. But I think that most people out there would do well to spend some time if you spend some time in your numbers. I showed you Inventory Lab. There's lots of ways you can track your numbers and so on. Inventory Lab's great because you can do your prep and ship in it too. But you can use a spreadsheet. You can use QuickBooks. People used to use GoDaddy. There's so many ways you can do it, but you need to get in there and at least understand kind of your big macro numbers. You understand like your revenue, which is your sales. You need to understand your gross profit, which is your amount of profit after you take out the cost of goods. You need to understand your operating expense, which is how much it's costing you to run the business. And then you understand your net profit, which is your net profit is what you got left to pay you in taxes for the most part. That's usually how people kind of look at it. The percentages, you can get them a little better in some ways. Like maybe 1 month you spent 8% on operating expenses, and the next month you only spent 7%. That's probably not going to be a huge win, but at least you know that there you can improve. I think you should know kind of those big macro numbers in your business, whatever it is. And even if you're doing this part-time, you should know it, or otherwise you're wasting your time. Like you're doing this for no gain. And I don't think that's really worth it for most people. I'm a numbers geek. I do like spreadsheets and statistics and analysis and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure that I'm making enough. And Mark asked if my net was around 11%. Yeah, that's probably about right for last month, I would guess. Yeah, maybe a little bit higher than that, actually. I'd have to look at the exact number. And like I said, I haven't put all my month-end operating expenses and other income and stuff in. And that's the thing. I use Inventory Lab to blend other income in with all this. So it all kind of gets in one big bucket. But the Amazon game, I know this. Like, I know that I can net 12% after expenses without breaking a sweat. I might even get to 15 if I'm really frugal. But let's say it's 12. So you start thinking about that. Well, if you do $100,000 in a year, you're going to net about $12,000, which is about $1,000 a month. Is that worth it for me in terms of the amount I put into it? Sure. It's not a full-time job to make 12 grand a month on Amazon. I don't think you're going to work anywhere near full-time hours to make that kind of money. And I see too that I could, of course, scale it and just really pump money into it and make less, but eventually make a lower percentage, but eventually make more money. I could outsource everything. I could outsource the prep and ship. I can outsource the buying. I have a team of VAs, and I have VAs who could buy for me, and I could literally make this business completely hands off and net 10% a month on it. Just 10% a month, 100 grand. I'm going to net $10,000 a year off of it, 200 grand, 20,000, so on. I don't know. I might go that route. I like the idea of being able to be, off the grid and not even doing anything and my business just running. But there's some steps I have to get to between now and then. So I think that if you know those percentages and those numbers, then you can really manipulate this business and do whatever you want with it. And it's the same with eBay. It's no different. eBay is a little cheaper to sell on, but you typically don't sell through as fast. So your $2,800 in cost of goods might not come back to you in 60 days. It might take 90 days. It might take 120 days, depending on what you're selling. But maybe not if you're selling something that's really moving really fast. But eBay, of course, you have to, list the items. You have to pack and ship them when they sell. There's some things you have to do. You have to have that part of the process down too. Maybe you can hire somebody to do that. If you have enough volume going through, that probably makes sense. I think Amazon, if someone is selling, if they're selling $30K a month, it probably is pretty close to, if not already, a full-time job at that point in terms of the money. I don't know that it still would be full-time hours. I think you could do 30,000 in 20, 25 hours a week, even if you're doing everything. And 30,000 a month, you might net 5,000 to 6,000 a month on it for yourself. Probably a little less than that. Probably 5 without breaking a sweat. Maybe 4,500 at the low end. So 50 grand, 60 grand a year before taxes for something that's not really a full-time job. I think you could do that on Amazon, and then if you could get by on a little bit less than that, you could just keep growing it and grow it up to 35 grand a month, 40 grand a month, 50 grand a month, whatever. You're going to have to figure out a few more things, and it's going to get a little more complex when you do that. But Amazon is really just a matter of just pump money in and get money back out on the other side at a rate of return. And yeah, it's got a lot of hassles and it's got its headaches, that's for sure. But everything does. I think overall it's a lot easier to scale on it than eBay. We've gone down that road many times before. I'm not going to go down again in today. But you have to know what your numbers are. You have to know your percentages. You have to know what you're making. And like I said, it's not about an actual dollar amount if it's high or low or better than this person or worse than that person. It's about, is it worth it to you for that amount? If you bring home $500 from Amazon next month or this month, is that worth it? How much effort did you put in? If you put in 2 hours a week of effort, that's probably worth it. If you put in 20 hours a week of effort, that's not worth it for most people, right? So, you have to look at that. And if you're putting in that effort and you're not getting a good enough percentage return or enough volume back, then something else is missing. Either you're not buying enough, or your repricing is terrible, or you're sourcing the wrong items. There could be so many reasons, but you definitely need to figure that out. But be cautious out there, gang, when you're in the reseller world and you're interacting with all these gurus and other sellers out there. I hate the word guru, actually. I don't know why I just used it. There are nefarious people out there who really don't have your best interest at heart, and they're not above fudging numbers. They're not above straight out lying. Let's be honest. I just showed you inside my inventory lab. There's no lie there, and it wasn't some big, super huge number. So I think I wasn't lying about it. And I had some good, and last month was a decent month compared to LY. It was up, but I don't have a lot of inventory in Amazon right now, so I'm working on doing that. I just bought about $1,000 worth of inventory today. So, that'll turn into $2,000 worth of sales over the next 30 days or 45 days, hopefully. I just caution you to ask people if they're making any money, and asking them gently. You don't have to be accusatory and say, post a comment or leave a comment and say, you're lying, you're not doing this, blah, blah, blah. You don't really know. There's no way you can know. But it's worth asking people a legitimate question and just saying, well, what was your margin? What was your net? What was your take home from that? And see what they say. And if it's way out of whack from some of the numbers, the percentage I just told you, chances are it's probably not right. So, all right. Well, gang, that's going to do it for today. I don't want to take too much of your time. Thanks again for jumping on with me. If you wouldn't mind hitting that like button down below, there's lots of helpful links in the description below too. If you want to get on our Chase and Asin service, which is free, that will help you get ungated in brands on Amazon. It just sends you 10 brands Monday through Friday that are auto ungate eligible. Sign up for it down below. It's a free service. It costs you nothing. And I would love to hear any of your comments on this video and the topics we've had. But I thank you all very much for joining me today. And until next time, this is the Prof saying,